Hello and welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly video recap from Reboot Illinois. I'm Madeline Dubeck here with Matt Dietrich, and this week we continue to get several warnings and bad signs that the state bill backlog is increasing at a rapid rate. And so you decided to take a look and put it in some context and look at the history of the thing. Can you tell everybody a little bit about what you did?
Last week, Comptroller Leslie Munger held a press conference in which she said that if there's no budget passed and put in place by December 31st, Illinois would be looking at a backlog of bills that totals $5.9 billion. And that's very close to the level of unpaid bills that the state had in December of 2010, which was shortly before the legislature, with Democratic votes only, passed the largest income tax increase in state history. So
to 5%.
Right, from 3% to 5%, that was a 67% increase. And that was intended to pay down this $6 billion plus backlog of bills over the 4 years that it would last. Well, as we saw, January 1st, 2015 came and the tax increase expired and the bill backlog was still almost as high, not quite as high, but it had gone down by a couple of billion. Now we're in a situation where, because we don't have a state budget, we really don't have any control over the spending that's still happening. Comptroller Munger said, if we continue on this trajectory, we're going to be back at 5.9 billion, which really translates more to 8.5 billion at the end of the calendar year, because there will be a lot of bills that aren't submitted to the comptroller yet, but that they know are in the agencies and about to be submitted. So I took a look at the history of the bill backlog, and I kind of had a ballpark idea of how it went. And it's
back quite a ways.
Yeah, and I went back basically for the last decade. Illinois has struggled with bill backlogs that range from about 1.8 billion all the way up to, I think it went up to 6.8, and it's been kind of peaks and valleys.
But you noted the last time we were ever in the black.
Right, that was the end of calendar year 2000. And along with the infographic, I put together a kind of a timeline that's on our website at rebootillinois.com. And that one goes back to 1998. The starting point of the timeline is 1998, when we ended the fiscal year, which is June 30th,
right,
with more than $1 billion surplus. Then you fast forward.
George Ryan was governor then,
Right. And then you go ahead 2.5 years to the end of calendar year 2000. We end with a $13 million surplus. So that's the last time we ended the calendar year with money in the bank. And from that point forward, we've always ended the calendar year, with a big stack of unpaid bills. And one thing that you'll notice as you go through this timeline is a pattern that repeats itself over and over again.
This is why we have the backlog.
Yes.
Okay, and that is?
And that is, the bill backlog will increase. Then the state does some borrowing. It gets the bill backlog down. And then a year later, we see the bill backlog up again, and there will be a report from the comptroller that says, well, we did really well last year because we had borrowing to help pay the bills, but this year we didn't have it, so it's up again. Then the next year they borrow, and it's a cycle that goes back and forth and back and forth. It was supposed to stop with the income tax increase of January 2011.
Right.
And what happened then was that
pensions became a problem.
That money went mostly toward pensions, because our pension costs went so high, and because at that time, under Governor Quinn, the state started making its full pension payment every year. One interesting thing that's going on now with the budget is we know that some kind of tax increase is going to come. And Comptroller Munger was actually on Rockford radio station WROK last week, and the hosts asked her what about raising the income tax again? Are we going to do that? And she had an interesting answer. Here's what Comptroller Munger had to say.
Honestly, every press conference I have, someone asks me, well, why don't we just go back up to 5% tax? Wouldn't that solve a lot of problems? Honestly, it won't really even make a dent in it. Our debt is so high now that it really requires a multi-pronged approach. It requires spending reform, spending cuts, more efficiencies.
And I think we already saw that, because in 4 years with the income tax at 5%, it really didn't help us that much then. You've got to have structural change. You're going to have to get a handle on all these things. The pension pressure is going to be there. The Supreme Court has said you have to pay that money.
Right.
Until we figure out something different, it's probably prudent to start thinking about how we're going to pay that.
Well, and as we've said before, the longer you go without a budget,
the more the bills
the less
pile
time
up.
you have to solve the
Right.
problem and balance the budget, and probably the more you're going to need in taxes and in cuts.
And we're also spending at 90% of last year's budget levels, and we're bringing in a lot less income. So you're going to have a compressed 6-month period of time, ideally, if it goes into effect January 1st, to get all this stuff paid down, and that's going to be pretty tough.
And no sign of any progress or even discussion between the governor and the Democratic leaders.
The word that we hear is that they have not all met since May.
All right. Well, that is the sorry state of affairs in Illinois. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you on the next edition of Only in Illinois.